Welcome everybody. I know it's pretty hard to talk after lunch, but let's see if we can engage. So we are very lucky to be here. Thank you, Leo, for inviting us to this panel. And here we have a very hectic panel, so we're gonna explore whose values are getting funded. And again, I'm taking some artistic freedom to move away from VCs and talk about investment. So part of my contribution to sharing some of the concept, the way we define it, so we can basically be more aligned with what different type of startups, whatever we define them, are here. So why don't we go around, and I'm gonna start this way, and then I'll introduce myself. Joao, please.
So should I introduce myself?
Yes, please.
Okay, so hey everyone, my name is João. I'm from Portugal. I'm a PhD student at the University of Oxford. I'm doing fairness and bias evaluation of health AI systems. Yeah, and I'm currently based in Boston for an internship. So I didn't come all the way from the UK.
And he's 1 year away of graduating, right?
Yes.
Yay.
But to be fair, it's only 3 years.
Awesome. Thank you again. Welcome, Bianca.
So, hey everyone, I'm Priyanka.
Yes.
Firstly, I want to thank you, my professor, who is now a colleague, who was at University of San Francisco. I recently graduated as health informatics, and she's my classmate. So, yeah. And then currently, I'm working in a space of AI, healthcare, tech in a startup company, and I want to bring my perspective with the builder side and into the investor field.
Thank you, Bianca. Monique?
Hi everyone, my name is Monique Davila. I lead clinical operations for a large decentralized trial using digital health tools for cognitive health in older adults. I have a public health background that kind of informs how I see equity and access in the work that I do. I also live in Merced, which is about 130 miles from here in California Central Valley. That region is mostly agricultural, lower income, more rural, and predominantly Hispanic, Latino, and immigrant communities. So that's also the perspective that I bring here today.
Thank you. Welcome. And by now, you guys know me. So Freddy Siva. I've been at the different side of the ecosystem, San Francisco, currently academia. I have the pleasure of have some of my students here. I'm doing research, most focused on AI governance and ethics. And today, believe it or not, before Leo asked me to be part of this, today we're launching my first book on AI governance. Thank you. This is a pleasure to be here and in a very nice surprise to basically be in here when, get that email saying, okay, it's available now, it's scary. So my soul is out there, 400 pages of AI governance if you want them. And the name of we're gonna put a plug there, it's called Ungoverned. And it's about AI, so think about that one, Ungoverned. So anyways, happy to be here. So we've been talking about how do we value, who's at the table, how do we go about evaluating contributions to different, and we talked about a lot of use cases. So let's go around, and the question is, how do you move beyond the normal metrics of where do we put our money? And again, I'm not talking on the VC side, I'm talking on all the work that you guys have been doing, serving communities that we do need it, and how do you think about that? So I'm gonna start with Monique, because you've been focusing on a community that is very unique with specific needs. So how do you guys look at the programs that you have there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when frameworks, like investment frameworks, value things like speed, scale, and exit, it naturally filters out innovations that require a little bit more time, more relationship building, more trust, especially in communities that have been more long period of time to be able to bring your solution or your offering to that community.
Awesome, thank you, Priyanka.
So I think in my work, what I'm working is on building health coaching chatbots, which trains on mainly the transcriptions and session histories or their personal histories, past history, everything. And we are trying to build the chatbot mainly to be very personalized, that it should consider the feelings of the person, not just the words from the transcripts, so that it can give a more accurate info on the decisions and create a personalized plan. This takes more weeks of time, but in the investor's perspective, they wanted the things to be done a little more faster. I think the investors also needs to think not just about the scaling numbers, also think about like how we are building the trust in the patients, so that they get how much value it is adding into the community.
Thank you, Priyanka. So, Joe, you're bringing an interesting perspective. I mean, we have a couple of people who've been spending time from Europe. So in Portugal, we spoke with somebody who is from Spain. So we're talking about the shock of the mess we have here, one of the most sophisticated healthcare system, which we spend the most money on it, but unfortunately we're kind of behind. So how do you see the problems being from the outside, thinking about what gets funded? Plus, you're in the UK now, so you're bringing more complexity here on thinking about how do we go about creating value, what gets measured, how do we fund things?
That's a great question. As you said, it's complexity on top of complexity. I do see different incentives and different metrics, like across the pond. It's very different. I think the healthcare system is motivated by different things. That's for sure. Here's much more capitalistic. Across pond is much more funded by the government, but then that does not necessarily mean that it's very efficient, or that everyone gets the access to the care that they need. A very sharp difference that we see between America and Europe is the way, and we were talking about this earlier, but I'll say it again, it's the way chronic conditions and very acute, so chronic conditions like diabetes or very acute conditions like cancer are managed. We see very good outcomes in chronic conditions in Europe because they're managed like throughout the life of the patients. Everyone has access to healthcare by default. You don't pay anything to go to your GP. You get your prescriptions. You even get your pills for free. On the other hand, if you have a very bad situation, let's say you have a cancer or something that's like really life-threatening and also very costly, there's a very high chance that you're not the priority for the healthcare system, and you have to go through a very long wait list. And a lot of people die because of that. So the cancer outcomes are not as good in Europe. On the other hand, here, healthcare is so expensive that you don't really go to your doctor as often as you should go, and you don't really spend the money on the medications that you should be spending, or you're not as comfortable with like going to hospitals because you're always afraid of what the bill will look like. And so chronic conditions are very poorly managed, or not as well managed, because it's something that comes at a very high cost. Not everyone has the best private insurances. Medicare, Medicaid don't cover everyone. And then on the other hand, if you have something like cancer, or a very bad situation, if you have an insurance that covers your condition, there's a very high chance that you might survive as long as your insurance covers it, because there's so much good research which has been at risk recently, but there's so much good cancer research, surgery outcomes are pretty good, and you get the best care much better than in Europe. So I see, I'm talking about outcomes because you asked about metrics before, and I think that the metrics should be very closely tied to the outcomes. What we really care in this space are the patient outcomes. that, and I think Andrea, you mentioned the issues around like having outcome-based or outcome-oriented metrics. It's very easy to fool the system. And that's in fact a problem with any metric. Any metric ceases to be a good metric as soon as it starts to be a metric, and that's the good part. And so that's something to think about. As soon as you start caring about like the number of patients you see per day and you optimize for that, your system will suffer from it. And yeah.
Thank you. So with that as a context, so and I'm gonna come back to you, Monique. So how do we go about who defines the problem? So in the case of Joao, what he explained, in centralized systems, we have a bureaucracy, good or bad here, we're not defining which one is better, we just want to understand how can we learn from other experiences and who's in the room and who's missing. So how do you go about defining what problem to solve, independently of where the revenues are, or whether we're raising money, whether it's an internal hospital that we need to fight for funding? So how do you go about for your community?
That's a good question. So always going back to the community and asking them about their priorities and needs, you will get different answers compared to, for example, like if you ask ChatGPT. I know many people use ChatGPT to create like synthetic data, and they create like these profiles, and they're like, give me a resident, like a 60-year-old resident from Merced, California, and then they get very specific, and then they receive like a response. And then they'll ask a question about their product or service based on that profile. But if you go into the community and you actually talk to people, you will get much more rich, real, lived experiences from those kinds of conversations. So I think the first step is involving the community, and it could take months or years to even be present in the community for them to even like trust you and be able to talk to you genuinely about like their concerns and their priorities. But it's the hard work that needs to be done.
Thank you. Priyanka?
Yeah, I think it is like when it comes to involving who defines the problem. Whenever we are trying to solve a problem, we are involving the engineers or healthcare professionals or the investors or funders, anything. I think it's also important to have the perspective from the patient side, because that's the data we are using. We are using the patient's data. They should know what we are doing with their data, right? And when they are involved, maybe they can share more, they gets more comfortable and share more problems what they are facing. So I think the more discovery can be happened when patients are also involved in defining the problem.
Thank you, Priyanka. How about
Yeah, absolutely. I think patients should be involved from the very beginning. The public patient involvement is growing, and I think we should have more of that. Like, we shouldn't be building solutions that don't ultimately serve the communities that they're intended to be used in. And that's a fundamental problem with the way we currently build solutions. I've been doing a lot of research and a lot of work in what we call fairness metrics to like characterize like how fair or how biased an AI system is. And one of the conclusions that we're arriving at is that fairness is actually very contextual. It's very hard to define. Like, we all have our own different definitions of fairness, and they will depend on our own backgrounds. What's interesting about this is that it's been a debate for so long, and even monkeys have their own definitions of fairness. And so something that is very important when we talk about fairness is understanding which incentives and which interests are at stake. When we have a decision, that decision could be polar or non-polar. When it's a polar decision, it means that it's going to polarize like the states that are involved. So let's say that you have a patient interacting with a healthcare system. If the decision is polar, let's say surgery prioritization, the patient will want to be on the top of the list, and the healthcare system will want to maximize the benefit for everyone. If the decision is non-polar, it means that both the patient and the healthcare system have their interests aligned, and they both want the same thing. And an example of this could be like a model, I don't know, predicting the success of a transplant, for example. They both want to know what like is expected from that transplant. And so I think we should be moving more to these kind of non-polar decisions where the interests are aligned, where the communities that are going to benefit from the model or the system or the solution are involved from the beginning so that they can design the metrics that will ultimately serve them. And if they, if the system optimizes for those metrics, it optimizes for that community.
Thank you. So one of the startup pitches was about aligning payers and providers and how do the billions of dollars in friction that we have systems like in the US, having agents on the provider side and agents on the payer side and having agents going against each other. And of course, it's a race that we have here. So how do we go about, Monique, how do we go about aligning incentives if the people we're supposed to serve as a society are not present when problems get defined?
That's an interesting question. So I think if the people that we are not building our solutions for are not present in the room, then we have to get as close as we can, or we have to try to get as genuine of data and reactions and feedback from that community. So you could go to like different foundations or different community organizations, for example, who are involved in their community and understand the priorities and values of the people that they serve to inform the solution that you're building.
Thank you. Priyanka?
Yeah, I think like I mentioned earlier, so when the patients are not involved, maybe we won't be able to build the solutions correctly. Maybe the information what we have is either a little bit of inaccurate or less to make the final decisions. So I would say like it's always important to have them in from the beginning.
Perfect.
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer to the question.
You don't, sir.
Because it's just, just such a complicated. But if we had the answer, we would have solved the problem already. And I'm sure it wouldn't be the first one. To be very blunt, I think it ultimately comes down to money. Like if you have like financial incentives, if you have tax cuts for those who include patients in their design of the solutions that you're building, things will change. But if it doesn't go through money, I think we might see a big change. To give you an example, and again, this is dangerous because then including patients or including these communities becomes by itself a metric, and you don't necessarily do it in the right way. You just like kind of try to include them for the sake of including them, so that you get the benefits that you're hoping to get. But to give you an example, in the UK, if you want to get a grant from the NIHR, which is equivalent to the NIH here, you need to have done some sort of PPI, so some sort of public patient involvement in your process of understanding what the problem is and defining your specific aims and whatnot. So that's a way. Does it work very well? I'm not sure, but I think it has something to do with it.
So let's talk program design as we're talking about that, and you guys have a lot of experience building products, and I'm saying them because I know them. We talked in the beginning, I think who was talking about the proverbial entrepreneur sitting on a basement now with Google building this little thing, or with Anthropic, or with GPT, and just basically coming up with a great demo and going there, a prototype, raising money, and how we need to demystify that concept of the solo entrepreneur who is building this on their own and without context. So in a world where AI is changing really fast, where every week is amazing, the improvement is hard to catch up, where policy and regulation is trying really hard to catch up, and we see areas like Europe, where basically they have a tier system, and if it's something that can really goes hard, it's pretty stringent. But if you're down on the middle, you can basically build tons of stuff. And of course, we have the China model, which is very stringent, a lot of provisions, data provenance, and you can track whose model is it. And basically, there are fines and a lot of repercussions if that happens. So how do you guys build? Let's come back. So this is a big context. How do you go about building a product today? Thinking about these communities that have no voice, thinking about making a good product that you can raise money with, whether it's, what we talk here, whether it's VC, whether it's grants, whether it's corporate venture capital or family offices, what have you. So how do you think about building something with all these moving pieces?
So in terms of just brainstorming and thinking of an idea with high impact for the communities that you want to serve, the first step is knowing, really having that kind of deep expertise on the community and their pain points and what they actually want you to solve or what kinds of solutions they're actually looking for. And if you don't have that personal deep expertise and experience with that issue or pain point or problem, then you need someone on your team who does, so they can help proxy and help you in the process really create an impactful solution that really gets to the heart of the problem or the issue, so you can make an impactful difference.
Customer center. How about you, Priyanka? What do you think? How do you go about building a product or conceptualizing a product with all these moving pieces?
So I think even for thinking about the problem, building the solutions for that, even for that we need funding if we want to explore more, because maybe we might get a very limited data without funding in our communities. So if we will be able to make the funders understand, like, we need money even to get the solutions or understand the problems of the community, so that we can develop more better solutions. So I think I would say that way.
Thank you. John?
I think I would maybe answer by reframing the question as like, how do we find the right problems to build for?
Okay.
Because oftentimes we build things for problems that we think are a problem, but in reality they're not a problem, and that's a big problem.
Okay.
Because we're just a hammering search for a nail, and we have this big AI thing that does amazing things, and we want to find some sort of niche that could, I don't know, make us rich or whatever. But that's, in my perspective, that's precisely the issue with these current models, that we're always looking for something to apply our skill set to. But in reality, we should have the persons with the problem, the communities, or identify what your pain points are and tackle them. But it should come from the ones that are actually facing the problems, and not us trying to.
That's a great perspective coming from somebody with a background that part of the world, which is pretty helpful. So stepping back, and the next question is, I guess it starts with me and the framework that I'm proposing. I've been doing research for the past 3.5 years, which is how do you go on defining the problem, and how do you go about what I'm asking you to do, which is building a product in a moment of funding a product or seeing what is, or hiring the right people, all these things, where all the pieces are moving, where technology is moving, regulation is moving, and our needs, no matter if you're in fintech, health tech, or higher education, they're moving drastically. You guys are touching in something that is fundamental for the model that I think we should be looking at it, which is focus on your customer, know who they are. I have a little framework, by the way. This is a plug. I have a free newsletter which I write every week in LinkedIn, and what I do, and I give you a secret, I get 40 research papers. I use AI very proudly, run it through two different models, and put my framework, which is think about profit at the top. We live in a market-driven society, so if you're gonna fund anything, it has to make money. But then you have planet, then you have people, you have protection, you have data provenance, product ownership. So thinking about what is it that we need to build something that could survive changes in technology, changes in policies, regulations, and taste, and all kind of things that are changing, especially in moments like that. So with that as a framework, what I encourage you, and I want to open it to everybody as we kind of have a few more minutes to go, on how do we move, because I kind of hate, I shouldn't say that word, opposed to dichotomies. It's either I make money or I do something good. So I want to encourage everybody here, similar to in the beginning, I wanted to encourage, and I need your help on that, to move away from, especially in the context of AI, which we don't understand, in context of regulation that is trying to catch up, and policies, and this becoming very strategic at the nation state level. How do we go about raising money? How do we go about building product? How do we go about including everybody on the conversation? Easy.
Yeah. I think the narrative of like who is an innovator and who gets to be seen as like a founder needs to shift away from like the traditional sense of like innovations are tech driven and it has AI. When there are innovations happening in communities, for example, like but they get overlooked, right? Like these innovations in the communities get overlooked because they are not like as tech driven or like fancy. They don't have the bells and whistles, but they are like increasing engagement. So for example, one innovation in a community could be a diabetes outreach program for non-English speakers that has a high engagement rate. But because it doesn't have like a technology component, people don't see it, unfortunately, as like an innovation. So once we start to like expand our mindset of who gets to be perceived as an innovator, I think more funding sources will start to open up and be more open to the idea of other people and other people who are innovators in their community, who are already plugged into their community. They have the trust, they know the pain points, so there's a rise of that kind of innovator.
So you're challenging the paradigm and the narrative traditional of Silicon Valley. It's only VCs, it's only scale, break things and go faster. You're saying just we need to move beyond that, especially in healthcare as this touches humans.
Yeah, I think to add to that, it's the narrative should shift from scale, quantity, percentages, from there to quality, trust, ethics, regulations to be followed when it comes to the healthcare fundings.
Huh?
Yeah, I'm going to underscore that. I think that maybe we should be moving slower and just take a deep breath and really think things through. Like, does it really make sense to do this? Like, do I have the capacity? Do I have the means? Do I know how to evaluate this system? Should we be spending like some more time like validating our ideas, or like making sure that they're not going to be a threat to patients, or that they're not going to be incredibly biased? So maybe we should, especially for healthcare, I think in healthcare we can both make money and serve a good purpose, but we need to be extremely cautious. And I think that this paradigm of moving fast and breaking fast doesn't really align with that need that the healthcare industry has.
I think something like how the clinical research follows many steps before coming into the market, right? Maybe in healthcare AI, even there should be some kind of steps that we can follow just before coming into market. And even those steps need to be funded.
Yes,
Of course.
yes. But it's getting easier. I was talking to one of our students too who's launching, I think he raised, I was telling somebody, $1 million, 950, and doing a device. And he's like smiling, saying, yeah, I got HIPAA compliance. Yeah, I'm doing clinical trials. You know the person? Yeah, I'm going to do FDA approval with a device. And he's smiling away with a tiny budget, but these things are getting easier. And he closed the conversation saying, it's never been the best time to start a company, to solve a problem, because we have so many tools, which is pretty refreshing to see that, you know, in a highly regulated industry like healthcare, and of course, life sciences and fintech and higher ed, that there are the tools out there, provided we know about them and we have, you know, communities who can engage. So with that, I'm gonna open it up. We have a few minutes, and I ask everybody to be kind with their questions. I'm not looking at anybody specific. Yes, Leo.
So I have this message about slowing down and reflecting, and I got a lot of pushback. They said we don't have time to slow down and to reflect because things are moving so fast. And I didn't really know what my comeback should be from that pushback.
Who wants to tackle this one?
I think it's the same thing we are facing in our startup company. Like, we don't have enough time, the investor says, and we need time to make sure we are building the right product for the patients, or even the physician should be comfortable. Like, they should trust, even the patients should trust.
And especially if your solution is touching human lives, there needs to be more, more care there, especially more care, because you're talking about, people's lives here. And I think that's a fair point to bring up to them too, is that like the cost of this, like move fast and break things, is actual human lives. So and risk and patient safety, and that's a very important, very big thing.
Thank you, John.
I'm going to be very conservative on this one, but I would argue that good things take time. And I don't know if you guys have tried the 30-year-old port wine. It's time. You know?
We'd love to try.
Yeah. So, you know, maybe like giving this space to mature is a good thing. And maybe we're getting to a point where your strongest argument is saying, oh, I've been building this for the past 20 years. And we're at like a very mature point. And I think that would be appreciated in times of AI. Because everything is, like, you can go from 0 to 1 in one Cloud Code prompt in like a 15-minute session. You can have like a dashboard. We're not going to value that anymore. That's so easy, anyone can do that. But like the time is like this token, and I mean token as in like it's the currency that is really, really hard to replace. And so I think that going slower is a good thing because it uses the time. The time is the thing we can replace.
So follow-up question, what about the 2 to 5 year cycle of return on investment that investors are looking for, that you should be making money in 2 to 5 years?
So I'll tackle that one. It goes back to my theory. I think this is dating 101. So somebody was raised a bunch of money, who was being on the other side. I think it's a match. It's like if I'm dating, if I want to get into a romantic relationship, I should be taking my time, knowing the people, getting to know them, and just making sure that whoever I bring as a partner, I think that's one of the things that I wish somebody told me many years ago with my first startup, which is make sure that your source of money is aligned with your values, your timeline. Because otherwise, that in a year from now, or 6 months from now, most likely you're gonna be in a place that you really wonder why you started that company to begin with. So my response, and please feel free to jump in, is one of the things that I think I made that mistake, and I see some of my colleagues from Stanford, making the same mistake is sometimes they just want to check and they don't really make sure that they're listening to what the investor is telling them. This is our horizon, this is what our LPs are doing, this is our thesis, are you on board or not? And if you're not, you don't want that check because that you're going to pay dearly for that. So I think that's one of, again, my message, feel free to jump in, is you gotta make sure, it's similar with employees, when you're looking for a co-founder, I would say, I gotta make sure that my co-founder is very aligned with me. Do I work, is it okay working in my garage or her garage? Or is it, I mean, what is it, your timeline? Do you have only 6 months to try that concept and then you're gonna get a full-time job? Maybe that's not the right mind. So be very careful on you co-founders, be very careful of you bring as an investors. Make sure what their motivations and constraint, because otherwise we're getting into the narrative, oh, they're bad or they're evil. No, this is their thesis, this is the timeline. Can you deliver yes or no? If not, you gotta look for more aligned resources, partners, similar with hospitals. I mean, those of us who have sold to hospitals, who have sold to higher education, who have sold into banking for crying loud, we know it takes months due diligence, which is part of what we're talking. It takes who you are, it takes compliance. Not every startup can deal with that. It's what's called, what is it, death by 1,000 cuts? So you gotta make sure that it's aligned, and because we're going fast, going back to your previous question, we say, yeah, we need a deal, otherwise we won't be able to raise money or get into the second round, but we're bringing the wrong partners. So I think there I would encourage you to the question that you had before, slow down. It's very important, especially in the beginning, because your margin of error is very small. Because one bad decision, the wrong co-founder, the wrong C-level team, the wrong pilot you get, the wrong check, basically in a few months you're gonna be toast. So again, that's my humble opinion. I don't know if anybody, or from the audience, wanna. This is the experience. I can show you the scars all over.
The 1,000 cuts.
Yes. Questions? We have a couple. Let's see. Ooh, we still have a few 6 minutes or so.
We can also start the next
Yes.
one a bit earlier too.
Any questions? Any comments?
That was great.
All right.